Good evening and welcome back to this week's issue of Moving Forward. With us today, we have the honor of having our Deputy Political Leader with us today, Dr. Anirudh Mahabir. Welcome back, Doctor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nigel. And Kavita, thank you for having me.
Dr. Mahabir, it's a pleasure to have you back on our show.
It's becoming a habit last week and this week.
And we look forward to having many more shows in your presence.
Thank you very much.
By all means, definitely.
Now, Dr. Mahabir, last week we went through and you held discussions with Nigel together with one of our other deputy political leaders, Dr. Douglas, on all that has been going on within our party. And I think it was just too much information to squeeze in
into such a small segment.
Into a segment, a 15, 20-minute segment.
Yes,
so
exactly.
we thought that this week we want you back in the program, and little by little, let's go through all that takes place within the COP, where we were, where we are, and where we're going.
Where we want to get to in the future.
Well, thank you very much for having me today. And I really would want to go back a little bit to recycle more or less what we did last week, to give an idea of how the party started, how we've moved from 2006 to 2012. And everyone knows, of course, that we started with our political leader, Mr. Winston Dukaran. We formed a party in the Center of Excellence. We moved forward from there. And Mr. Dukaran has been leading us for the last 2 or 3 years and had been working very, very hard. We've had street talks even in those days. We've had a situation where we've had 50 meetings in 10 days. Then later on, we've had a situation where we had 50 meetings in 5 weeks. We've had interviews. We've had the grand consensus. We've met with the NGOs. We spoke about all the national issues.
Yes.
And as a political party, we were maturing very quickly and very fast.
50 meetings in 5 days,
Yes.
50 meetings in 5 weeks. That's election months for me.
Yeah, but it wasn't election at all.
Wasn't.
And the strange thing, it was not election. Election had not been called. But we were building the party. And we would find ourselves in one region. And I remember quite well, you start the meetings at 5 and you end up at about 10. And you spend a half hour, 45 minutes just rotating around. So each meeting got a full cadre of speakers. But because the meetings were held near to each other, distance-wise, we were moving around from one meeting to the next meeting. So each meeting got a full cadre of speakers. And I had a full meeting. And that way we had 50 meetings in 5 days. Wow. It was amazing. It was amazing. Then we realized later, well, it was really too much. We couldn't handle that again. So we had 50 meetings in 5 weeks in the south of San Fernando. And those came out very, very well. In those days, and even now, the population responded to the message that we were giving out. They responded to the message. And the message, of course, of transparency, of good governance, of justice. People were getting they were unhappy about the political state of the country at that time. And they were looking for something new. We were new. We were new. We were guiding the people in a new direction. We were preaching new politics.
Right.
We were preaching politics of the future. And we were hoping that we would have been able to influence enough people so that they would have voted for us and get us into government, and so we can influence
I think the
policies.
The phrase new politics is what I would like to believe was penned by our founder, the Honorable Mr. Winston Dukaran.
Yes.
And I remember in his speeches and from the inception of the Congress of the People, in all his messages, it would be, this is new politics. This is a time for new politics. And a lot of people will stop and ask, what is
exactly
new politics?
Is new politics?
Yes.
What does it involve? You wish to speak with
Well, let me just first of all
new
say,
politics
people think new politics is new. But the first time I heard Mr. Dukaran mention new politics was in 1994 in Gulf City. And I remember it very well, because when he used the terminology new politics, it struck me. This is something we really need in this country. Yes. We needed a new direction of politics. We need politicians who the people can trust. We need politicians who are honest. We need politicians who are transparent. We need them to do things for the people and not for themselves. And basically, that is what we wanted. We wanted a political party to service the country, not to service the party. And we thought that if we were to become the government, we will not be running the country in such a way so that we ensure we get back into power. We were going to run the country in such a way that the country can benefit as much as they can.
I think when we hear honesty and politics
And integrity
and
in
politicians. They don't. It doesn't balance. It never balances, and that's something as a younger person in the community. We hear politics, we hear politicians all the time, not only during election times, but especially at election times. And we hear them talk about integrity and honesty, and we shake our heads, really.
It's not something that we tend to associate with politicians, unfortunately, but I think that's what the COP is about. We're here trying to change that stereotype when it comes to politicians, integrity, and good morale in general when it comes to dealing with the public, the people, and everything on the whole as it pertains to
that is why when we came out, we resonated with the population, we resonated with the younger people, we resonated with the professionals, we resonated with the people who were thinking, and therefore that is why when the 2007 election was called, we got 23% of the votes. 23% of the votes. And that is not a small amount. The opposition at that time got, I think, 27 or 28. It wasn't much more than we got, but we got no seats, and they became the opposition, which is another conversation. And
that will be coming up later on in this evening's program, where we talk about proportional representations. 23% of the votes, no seats.
That's right.
27% of the votes, seats in Parliament.
That's right.
And where is that going? Where is proportional representation going to take us? And I know we will be discussing that a little later on with you. Now, Dr. Mahabir, you mentioned 2007. It was a big year for the COP.
Yes.
General elections. Unfortunately, the results weren't what we wanted.
No,
2007.
We had a lot of support,
We had a lot of support. We had a lot of support. There was a great hype in the country.
Oh, definitely.
A new party had entered. We were preaching a different kind of politics. We were not talking about ethnicities. We were not pandering to one ethnicity or the other.
We were
pulling everybody together. We were issue-based, and that is what we were trying to do. And people resonated. Unfortunately, I think people somehow, at the end of the day, they went back to the original moorings.
I think it wasn't that little cry, that outcry, and the birth of the COP wasn't only in Trinidad and Tobago. At that time, at the birth of the COP and the 2007 elections, I was studying in England, and it was just as crazy in that the message of the COP was everywhere. It was not as prominent on the internet as it was in the last election in 2010, but it was present. It was there, and I remember following it up, following all the updates, and being very much involved in the COP. Unfortunately, not being able to vote at the general elections. But that hype was there, and the whole fact that we had a party now with the new regime then, where
bringing something new to the table.
Something new to the table. Issues were being discussed, issues were at hand, and this is a party who we felt at that time and continue to feel now
that we
can make a difference.
And that we can trust.
We can most definitely trust.
The one thing I like to say about the COP, it is here to stay. It is here to stay. We will continue to do the kind of politics that we are doing now. Election time is not the only time that we work. After the 2007 elections, we were still on the streets. We are the one who started Axe the Tax. The Honorable Prakash Ramada, our leader now, he's the one who fasted in Port of Spain. And the Rima and San Fernando, together with our deputy political leader, Dr. Douglas. We are the ones who worked after the 2007. And there was no election in sight. There was no election. We had street walks. We had cop on wheels where we were going around with trucks and with cars and pickups across the country, carrying our message. There was no election around, but we were working and we were there. And we were I think that we were getting into the people's minds as the new politics of the country, when I like to say that the snap election of 2010 kind of derailed us in a way. And we had to make a snap decision.
The momentum was building, and then you just had to stop short and go into election mode.
That's right. And we had to go into election mode straight away. We had to make a snap decision because of the snap election.
Yes.
And we did that. And I must say in 2010, we did very, very well. Look at the seats that we won.
Exactly.
Let's think of the seats that we have won. Six seats. But look at the seats that we won.
The areas.
I mean, Dabadio Mira, Tonapuna, San Fernando West, Arima. These are stalwart PNM seats, and we were able to take them.
And not to mention, the Diego Martins are now marginal.
Diego Martins are marginal.
Yes.
Let me say this. If I go back to 2007, in 2007 we got over 6,000 votes in Oropouche East. In 2007, we got over 6,000 in one of the Diego Martin Central, I think it was. So we had an appeal across ethnic lines, across regions, you know. But in 2010, we are now with 6 seats.
Yes. I think the fact that the COP didn't wait for elections. As a party, we didn't wait for elections to start making inroads, showing the people and reminding the people, listen, we're a party who we stand by our words.
We're functional, we're relevant.
Yes. We're not going to just come around in your constituency and in your area and assist you when it's election time.
That's right.
We're doing it before elections, whether or not we had seats. We're doing it throughout the interim time between elections, and we're continuing to do that and working within our communities.
Yes.
Whether we have seats in the areas that we have seats and the areas that we don't.
Exactly.
Yes. We have a cadre of people who believe in the Congress of the People. And many of them are young. Not old like me. I might be the oldest with gray hairs. But many of us are young in the Congress of the People, and they're eager to help. And this is where we had planted the seed of new politics among the young people. And we are hoping, when I say the COP is here to stay, because we are convinced that the young people will take us forward. And we are giving them a rein to go forward. I mean, let's just think of it. When Mr. Dukran decided not to go forward for the election, he was saying, let the younger people go ahead. It is unheard of in this country. In another party in this country, they had to go election and kick somebody out. Terrible. When we gave up here, it reverberated in Jamaica. And Jamaica, the prime minister gave up for his deputy prime minister, who eventually lost the election. So it is something that is happening. We have started something. We are saying that politics is not a terrible profession. Politics is a noble profession if practiced correctly. And we think that obviously the youth is the future of this nation.
In tying in, Dr. Mahabir, when you said that Mr. Dukran stepped down as his role as our founder, well, not as our founder, but as our political leader, to let the youth in, yet the younger generation take over. It also held to our constitution where we would have elections for our political leaders. One man, one vote. And we pulled off a very successful, clean campaign last year, last June to July. And that's where Mr. Ramada was voted in as our new political leader. But it was a wonderful campaign. All our leaders, all the representatives who were going up for that position were on the same table. They attended all the meetings together. There was a rapport, camaraderie between all of them.
Not necessarily. It wasn't always friendly all the time, but at the end of the day, we still remain one big COP family. I think that's very important.
I think post that election really is what we should look at. Or Mr. Delima, Vice Chairman, comes to all our meetings.
Still does.
He still does. Anil Roberts is still with us. You know, everybody, Ms. Dial is still with us. She's taking an active role with us. So this just goes to show you how we in the COP do our business. I mean, you become a contestant, you want to become political leader, you were not chosen. This doesn't mean you should leave the party.
You're still a member of the Congress of the People, and there's work to be done.
That's right.
And we work as a team.
Exactly, and your contributions are still important.
That's right. So two things. One is like that, but the other thing is one man, one vote. It's the only party in this country that has a one man, one vote. And if I may say so, I understand that the UNC in their March elections are going to adopt the same thing, one man, one vote. So we are starting a trend. And if we do it, if the United National Congress do it, I expect the PNL will follow as well.
I would like to think so myself.
To my mind, is the best way of electing a leader.
It's for the members to truly put forward.
It's true democracy.
Person. It is. It is most definitely true democracy.
Yes.
You're voting for the person that you strongly believe
should lead you and guide.
And as an individual, you're putting your choice forward.
Exactly.
That's right.
One of our major events, and we see a lot of it happening at our last National Assembly. The now Honorable Prime Minister, Mrs. Kamala Persad-Picasso, was present. Our recently held National Assembly that took place on the 14th of January at Hillview College was one of our biggest events ever. Most important, very important, and a lot took place at that National Assembly?
The National Assembly is usually the biggest occasion in any party.
Yes, it is.
We have been having National Assemblies routinely every year. And the one we had in January this year is the one we were supposed to have in October last year, but because of the state of emergency, we postponed it. But you would think that we're considered the third party. People think that we're not important in the government. People think, oh, you only have 6 seats, so you're not important. But at that assembly, we had over 1,500 people turned up. Official people turned up. But even more importantly than 1,500 turned up, we signed up 129 new members on that one day. And that tells you something. It tells you that people are still unhappy with what they have. They're still looking forward to the Congress of the People leading them sometime in the future. And that really is a message we have to give.
You still believe there's hope?
There is hope. There is hope. As far as I'm concerned, as long as the COP is alive, and I know they will be for a long time, there is hope for this country.
I think that's one of the symbols of what the COP stands for, you know?
Yes, we will be there. You know, at that assembly, all kinds of things happened. We had resolutions read. We had 5 resolutions.
5 very important resolutions that
we had our feature speaker was from Guyana. He came across, and as you probably know, he's the chairman of the Alliance for Change. He got 7%. His party got 7% of the votes in Guyana, and he got 5 seats. We got 23% of the votes.
And no seats, unfortunately.
So what does that say? And then he is in the position in Guyana to say, okay, he's siding with the opposition so that they can choose the speaker and the deputy speaker of the House. So the minority government in Guyana now does not have the speaker, does not have the deputy speaker, and does not have a majority. So it is going to be an interesting next few years in Guyana, what is going to happen. But just goes to show you a small party can influence, can make a big difference. And it reminds me of St. Vincent. There was a party of one person who held the reign, and he became prime minister because he was the one to decide who will be in the government. And he negotiated prime ministership for himself.
I think that's where we know that proportional representation, that discussion is going to come up. And I know last week we aired Mr. Ramjatan's speech, Mr. Kimran Ramjatan's speech, and where he spoke about proportional representation and what it's like in Guyana, now being in government in Guyana, what it's like. And I know we're going to be discussing proportional representation a little later on in this evening's program. We also know at National Assembly, going back to the resolutions that were passed, one of the other resolutions was the Green Manifesto. Now, Nigel, I know this is your pet. The environment is your pet.
Yes,
it is. Just run through briefly with us the Green Manifesto and the resolution that we passed, that was passed at National Assembly.
Essentially, the Green Manifesto looked at, or we would like to see an acceleration of the process of certain laws being taken into consideration. So we essentially want to accelerate the development of regulatory bodies and programs. And I think personally, certain bits of legislation that we'd like to look at, for example, would be quarrying. Quarrying and the legislation around quarrying is a bit of concern, especially for a lot of us in Trinidad and Tobago right now. As we know, many quarries, or I believe more than 95% of our quarries, are not under EMA regulation simply because any quarry under 150 acres does not require a certificate of environmental clearance.
Yes.
And as a result of that, they essentially go unmanned. They can do whatever they want. There's nobody
to rein them in, no overseeing power.
Exactly, no overseeing power. They have no guidelines as into what happens after the resources have been extracted. No ideas in terms of refurbishment of the environment, nothing of the sort.
It's not an unlimited resource. It will come to an end.
It will come to an end, unfortunately. And this is legislation that I think needs to be looked at. And it's apparently not that difficult to be resolved.
Yes.
And
go ahead.
Yes, and other things I would like to see, for example, when we look at the Green Manifesto, we have to take general care of the environment. We produce a lot of plastic waste. We'd like to see legislation there concerning the collection and recycling of plastic bottles, for example. I think that is also important. And I also think that recycling should also be high on the agenda when it comes to environmental concerns.
that is just one of the other manifestos that was, one of the other resolutions that was passed at our National Assembly that took place on January 14th. We need to take a little break now. When we come back, we discuss 3 other resolutions that were passed, and we go into a little deeper discussion with Dr. Mahabir on proportional representation. We'll be right back.